know how difficult it is sometimes to serve one another in love when you don't have any loving feelings going on for the people that you're supposed to be serving? Mother Teresa said one time, at the end of life, we will not be judged by how many diplomas we've received, how much money we've made, how many great things we have done. We will be judged by, quote, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was naked and you clothed me. I was homeless and you took me in. That's how, as she saw it, that we're going to be judged at the end of time. Now there's a guy that I've heard of. His name is Mike Murdock. And I'm not particularly a great fan of Mike, but every now and then you hear a quote that comes up that really grabs your attention. Well, you might want to write this one down because it really grabbed my attention, and I hope that it will grab your attention too. He said this. He says, those who unlock your compassion, I'm going to repeat this multiple times here today. Those who unlock your compassion are those to whom you've been assigned. Again, this is Mike Murdock. Again, those who unlock your compassion are those to whom you've been assigned. The story says a man was driving his car when he saw an old lady stranded on the side of the road. He saw that she needed help, so he stopped his Pontiac near her Mercedes and got out. He smiled, and while he was approaching her, still she was worried, as nobody had stopped for hours. Moreover, he did not look safe, as his appearance was so poor and shabby. He could see how frightened she was, so he tried to calm her. I'm here to help you. Don't worry, my name is Brian Anderson. The tire was flat, so he had to crawl under the car. While changing the tire, he got dirty and his hands were hurt. When the job was done, she asked how much she owed him for his help. Brian smiled. He said, if you really want to pay me back, the next time you see someone who needs help, give that person that help and just think of me. And the same evening, the lady stopped by a small cafe. The place looked dingy. Then she saw a waitress nearly 8 months pregnant, wiping her wet hair with a towel. The waitress had a sweet, friendly smile, although she had spent hours on her feet the whole day. The lady wondered how someone who was so little can be so kind and giving to a stranger. Then she remembered Brian. The lady finished her meal and paid with a $100 bill. The waitress went to get change, and when she came back, the lady was gone. She left a note on the napkin, you don't owe me anything. Somebody once helped me, just like now you're helping me. Just like I'm helping you, excuse me. If you really want to pay me back, do not let this chain of love end with you. The waitress found 4 more $100 bills under the napkin. That night, the waitress came home earlier. She was thinking about the lady and the money she left. She was wondering how the lady could know how much she and her husband needed it, especially now when the baby will arrive soon. She knew that her husband worried about that, so she was glad to tell him the good news. Then she kissed him and whispered, now everything will be all right. I love you, Brian Anderson. The young man who helped the older lady work on her car, if you remember the name. Over in the book of Proverbs, there was a man that lived a few thousand years ago by the name of Solomon. Scripture tells us that he was very rich, very wise, and he said in chapter 28, he who gives to the poor will never want, but he who shuts his eyes will have many curses. Another paraphrase of this text says, if you give to the poor, your needs will be supplied, but a curse upon those who close their eyes to poverty. How many times haven't you and I walked away from an opportunity to help people because we're in such a hurry, or we have an agenda, or our schedule doesn't allow to fit in times and spaces to to really help people in their lives? One day, a poor boy who was selling goods from door to door to pay his way through school found he had only one thin dime left, and he was hungry. He decided that he would ask for a meal at the next house. However, he lost his nerve when a lovely young woman opened the door. Instead of a meal, he asked for a drink of water. She thought he looked hungry, so she brought him a large glass of milk. He drank it slowly and then asked, "How much do I owe you?" "You don't owe me anything," she replied. "Mother has taught us to accept pay for a kindness, to not accept pay for kindness." He said, "Well, I thank you from the bottom of my heart." As Howard Kelly left that house, he not only felt stronger physically, but his faith in God and mankind was strong also. He had been really ready to quit and throw in the towel that day. Years later, that young lady became critically ill. The local doctors were baffled. They finally sent her to the big city where they called in specialists to study this rare disease. Dr. Howard Kelly was called in for the consultation. When he heard the name of the town she came from, a straight light filled his eyes. Immediately he rose and went down the hall of the hospital to her room. She was dressed in his doctor's gown, and he went in to see her. He recognized her at once. He went back to the consultation room, determined to do his best to save her life. From that day on, he gave special attention to this case. After a long struggle, the battle was won, and Dr. Kelly requested the business office to pass the final bill to him for approval. He looked at it, then wrote something on the edge of the bill that was sent to her room. She feared to open it, for she was sure it would take the rest of her life to pay for it. Finally, she looked, and something caught her attention on the side of the bill. She began to read the following words: "Paid in full with one glass of milk." That was the little boy that went to her door some years earlier to ask for a glass of water, and she supplied it with a glass of milk. Martin Luther King Jr. was a very wise man, and he said one time, "Everybody can be great." I love this quote about him that he said. He said, "Everybody can be great because anybody can serve." Anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You don't need a heart full, you just only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. Just to serve, just to make a difference in somebody's life that probably won't be able to pay you back ever again. Over in James, if you want to turn over to James, James is in the end of the New Testament, but James was a very wise guy. James 3, starting in verse number 13, it says this: "Who among you is wise?" I'm in James 3. "Who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior his deeds," listen, "in the gentleness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be arrogant and so lie against the truth." This is James talking. "The wisdom is not that which comes down from above, but is earthly, natural, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder in every evil thing." Verse 17. "But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle and reasonable, full of grace and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy." Verse 18. "And the seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace." Now, a paraphrase of this text says this a little differently. Do you want to be counted as wise, to build a reputation for wisdom? Here's what you do. Very simple. Live well, live wisely, live humbly. Those three things. Live well, live humbly. If it's the way you live, not by the way you talk. Again, it's the way you live, not by the way you talk, that counts. He said, this paraphrase says, mean-spirited ambition isn't wisdom. Boasting that you're wise isn't wisdom. Twisting the truth to make yourself sound wise isn't wisdom. It's the furthest thing from wisdom, the text says. It's animal cunning, devilish conniving. Whenever you're trying to look better than others or get the better of others, things fall apart and everything ends up in other people's throats. Verse 17. Real wisdom, this paraphrase says, real wisdom, God's wisdom, begins with a holy life that's characterized by getting along with others. That's a whole sermon all by itself, I think. It is gentle and reasonable, overflowing with mercy and blessings, not hot one day and cold the next, not two-faced. You can develop a healthy, robust community that lives right with God and enjoy its results only if you do the hard work of getting along with other people, treating each other with dignity and honor. You know how difficult it is to treat others with dignity and honor? Tim and I were in the car just a day or two ago, and I'm not going to get into the details of all of it, but I'll share part of it, that there were two people in the car behind me. And one of them proceeded to take a picture of my car, and the second one was to give me the one-way sign. And I'll leave that to your imagination. I won't tell you why they did that, because that would make me look pretty bad. But anyway, I'll tell you, I passed them, and they didn't like that I passed them, because they were going 10 miles below the speed limit, and I was in a hurry, and then they decided to get angry at me. And I told Tim, I says, there would have come a time many years ago that I would have stopped my car, put it in park, got out of the car, went over to their car and gave them a little piece of my brain in the form of anger or not so niceness. These days, as I approach an older year, I decided just to let it go because some things aren't worth getting upset over. There's things that are just so small potatoes that it's not really worth investing your time, or may I say more accurately, spending your time doing things that really aren't going to get you farther ahead than what you were. Again, Mike Murdoch's quote, those who unlock your compassion, listen, are those to whom you've been assigned. A few years ago, Juliana was rushed to the hospital with a temperature, and in her situation, that's never a good thing. So Tammy went first, and I had other kids at home to get squared away. So I proceeded to, at the time we had a 12-passenger van, and I proceeded to fly down a certain route to get to the hospital. It was a one way this way and one way this way, so there's no room to pass. Well, that doesn't matter with me. So, I'm passing people and speeding, and people are honking. I've got the hazard lights on. So long story short, these days, when I see people passing me and flying past me, 80-90% of the time, I have compassion on them because I don't know why they're doing what they're doing. True. How many of us tend to judge people because we don't know the whole story? I go back to Mike Murdoch's quote, those who unlock your compassion are those to whom you've been assigned. Have you ever gone through stuff in your life that you've been more compassionate with people as a result of the situations you've come through? Whereas those situations that you haven't come through, you really don't understand why certain people do certain things. But after you've bled a little, after you've been cut a little bit, after you've been punched in the face a little bit, you really know what it feels like, and you have a little bit more compassion. Now, I would suggest to me, that I don't want to have to get punched in the face multiple times to understand what people are going through. I would like to think at least sometimes I have enough love in my heart, enough compassion in my mind, in my heart, to pity people, to want to help people, to want to make a difference in people's lives without really understanding the whole picture. Are you with me today so far? A young second lieutenant at Fort Bragg discovered that he had no change when he was about to buy a soft drink. He flagged down a passing private and asked him, "Do you have change for $1?" The private said cheerfully, "I think so, let me take a look." The second lieutenant drew himself up stiffly and said, "Soldier, that's no way to address an officer. we'll start all over again. Do you have change for $1? The private came to attention, saluted smartly, and said, "No, sir." The point of the being is sometimes, you just want to serve. Who cares what the titles are? There's so many books out these days about leadership, and some leaders expect the titles and others could care less about the title. It's not about titles. It's how much you choose to serve people every single day. There's so many examples throughout history, and I've shared multiple examples throughout history here, how some people have gone through very difficult times in their lives, in environments and situations that we can only imagine. In fact, we can only imagine in our worst nightmares that they've gone through so much stuff. However, they have been able to love despite being, in this example, punched in the face and or multiple times worse situations. Over in John chapter 13. John chapter 13, starting in verse number 34. John was a follower of Jesus, and John had a very deep understanding of Christ. But he said this in John chapter 13. It says, "Let me give you a command." This is Jesus talking. "Love one another in the same way I loved you. You love one another." Let me say it again. "Let me give you a new command." Now, let me just pause a minute. That culture came from a list of, I don't really remember how many laws, but there were more than a few. Hundreds of laws, meaning that on a certain day, if you lifted a stick on a certain day, you sinned, you did something really bad. Or you can't be in the same company as this person because they didn't take a bath this week. Or some crazy stuff, crazy laws that were in the Bible, and people have to follow those laws. So here's what Jesus said. "Let me give you a new command," okay? Simply put, love one another. In the same way I loved you, you love one another. Now that's a big horse pill to swallow right there. Again, I'll repeat it for the third time. In the same way I loved you, you love one another. This is how everyone will recognize that you're my disciples, when they see the love you have for each other. Amen. Now, I would suggest that you and I have a long way to go to love like Jesus loved his followers. Because I'll tell you, some days I get up in the morning and I deal with certain types of people, and I have zero love in my heart for those kinds of people. I'll tell you flat out. Whether it's people in business or whether it's, other relationships. Some days you feel like loving, and some days you don't feel like loving. And Jesus said it, in the same way I loved you, you love one another. So in my understanding of the Bible, Jesus got up every day loving people and wanting to serve people. Even people that didn't look like him, even people that didn't believe like him, even people that didn't talk like him, even people that didn't walk in the same circles that Jesus walked in, his goal was to love those people anyway. Booker T. Washington said, "Those who are happiest are those who do the most for others." Again, those who are happiest are those who do the most for others. Again, I have so many examples in my brain right now of people who do so much for others, and they're always joyful. You know why? Because honestly, they don't have time to worry about their own problems because they're always trying to lift other people up. That's a really cool tool, folks, that if you're going through difficulties, start focusing on the problems of other people to lift their loads, and then when you lift their loads, then guess what? Your problems don't seem nearly as big. I'll say it for the fourth or fifth time, Mike Murdoch's quote. "Those who unlock your compassion are those to whom you've been assigned." Maybe there's a purpose why you feel compassion for certain people in your life. Maybe because maybe the universe, maybe God, maybe maybe there's a hunch, a desire. Maybe you've been wired to serve people in this arena because you have a pull with these people. That there's something about this person or this group or this segment of society that you're really drawn to. Well, maybe you were born to serve that segment of society. Amen. Who knows? Maybe. Sorry. Barry Cameron tells about an airplane flight that he took. On the flight, there were 4 servicemen, but before the door of the plane was closed, the pilot announced that we had a number of special guests on our flight and asked us to show our appreciation to them. The plane erupted in applause and cheer. It's a wonderful way to begin a flight. A few moments later, a woman and a man in first class got up and came back to 2 soldiers in the coach cabin and said, "Would you like to sit in first class?" The look on the soldiers' faces was priceless. So was the look from others in first class, looking back, and many of us in the coach section. The 2 soldiers stood and got their bags from the overhead compartment and walked up to the first class section and took their new seats. Amazingly, a few minutes later, another couple got up from first class and came back and did the same thing for 2 more soldiers. To say the least, it was a very moving experience. As our plane lifted up and began to climb into the clouds, I couldn't help but admire the 4 common, ordinary people who may not have been Christians. They did something uncommon and extraordinary. They served rather than waiting to be served.
Amen.
When was the last time that you chose to serve just for the sake of serving? Just because, without wanting anything in return. I think that's the love that Jesus is talking about. When he said to love one another like I have loved you. Turn over to John chapter 10. John chapter 10, the paraphrase called The Message puts it this way in John chapter 10. It says, Jesus told this simple story, but they had no idea what he was talking about. So he tried again. He says, I'll be explicit. He says, I am the gate for the sheep. And let me pause. In that culture, 2,000 plus years ago, there was a lot of farming, and then you had a lot of shepherds and sheep. And so folks in that culture understood that connection between talking about sheep. So he says, I'll be explicit. I am the gate for the sheep. He said, all those others are up to no good. They're sheep stealers, this paraphrase says, every one of them. But the sheep didn't listen to them. I am the gate, Jesus said. Anyone who goes through me will be cared for, will freely go in and out, and find pasture. A thief is only there to steal and kill and destroy. I came so that they can have real and eternal life, more and better than they ever dreamed of. Verse 11. This is Jesus talking in a paraphrase form. He says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd, listen, puts the sheep before himself. I think King James says the good shepherd lays his life down for the sheep. He sacrifices himself if necessary. A hired man is not a real shepherd, this paraphrase says. The sheep mean nothing to him. He sees a wolf come and runs for it, leaving the sheep to be ravaged and scattered by the wolf. He's only in it for the money. The sheep don't matter to him. Verse 14. I am the good shepherd, Jesus said. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. In the same way, listen, the Father knows me and I know the Father. I put the sheep before myself, sacrificing myself if necessary. You need to know that I have other sheep in addition to those in this pen. I need to gather and bring them too. They'll also recognize my voice. Then it will be one flock, one shepherd. This is why the Father loves me, because I freely lay down my life. And so I am free to take it up again. No one takes it from me. I lay down my own life, free will. I have the right to take it up again. So this point in this particular text is it lists several times, in several examples, how Jesus chooses to sacrifice his wants, his desires, for the sake, in this example, of the sheep, which mirrors people, which mirrors human beings. I wonder how many of us get up every morning wanting to sacrifice our desires, what we want to do every day for the sake of other people.